Welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at Troyes. This is a 2 to 4 player area influence dice worker placement economic game, where you take the role of wealthy families in the French town of Troyes in the year 1200. You'll be gaining and deploying citizens to the 3 principal buildings: the military building, or red, the religious building, or white, or the civil building, or yellow. You'll also be helping construct the cathedral and combating events, trying to become the most prestigious family in the region. How do you become the most prestigious family and win the game? By having the most victory points at the end of the final round. Now that we know what the winning condition is, let's take a look at the components, setup, and how gameplay works in Troyes. Now let's take a look at the components. You have the main game board, event cards in red, yellow, and white, activity cards in red, yellow, and white, character cards, start player card, player aids. In each player color, you have wooden discs, citizens, and cubes. In the neutral or gray color, you have citizens and cubes, dice, money, victory point tokens, the appendix, bonus and solo variant, and your rulebook. Now let's take a look at the setup. We're going to be setting this up for a 3-player game, which takes 8 steps. Step 1, place the main board in the center of the play area. Step 2, choose a color and get player components. You will choose a color and get the wooden discs, citizens, and cubes of that color. Place 1 wooden disc on one of the 5 districts as a district marker. You will want to use the district closest to you. Place the other disc on 4 on the influence track. Keep a number of citizens based on the number of players. In a 2-player game, you will keep 6 citizens. In a 3-player game, you will keep 5 citizens. And in a 4-player game, you will keep 4 citizens. So in this case, our players will keep 5 citizens. Place the remaining next to the game board, creating the general supply. Keep all of the cubes in your player area. Step 3, gain starting resources. Get 5 money and a character card to keep secret. In a 2-player game, you will get 2 character cards. Step 4, sort, shuffle, and place activity cards. You'll sort the activity cards by color and number. Then you will shuffle and randomly place 1 of each number for each color on their corresponding locations on the main board. Step 5, sort, shuffle, and place event cards. You'll sort the event cards by color, shuffle each stack, and select a number of red event cards based on the number of players. In a 2-player game, you will select 4. In a 3-player game, you will select 5. And in a 4-player game, you will select 6. This corresponds to the number of rounds in a game. So in a 2-player game, you'll have 4 rounds. In a 3-player game, you'll have 5 rounds. And in a 4-player game, you'll have 6 rounds. Then place these stacks next to the main board. Step 6, place supply pools. Place your neutral citizens, neutral cubes, dice, money, and victory point tokens next to the main board. Step 7, choose a starting player. The player who last read a history book is our start player, or you could select the start player at random. Then you will give them the start player card. So in this case, blue is our start player. Step 8, choose your initial citizen placement. Players will draft locations next to the 3 buildings to place their citizens. For the first round of placements, you will go in turn order. For the second round, you will go in reverse turn order. And then you will repeat this for the remaining rounds of placement. So the 3rd time you'll go in turn order, 4th time you'll go in reverse, and in this case, our 5th time will go in turn order. Once everyone has placed all of their citizens, you will place the gray neutral citizens on the remaining locations, except in a 2-player game, which are described in the rulebook. Looking at the 3 buildings, the yellow, or civil building, will give you a yellow die and cost you 0. The religious building, or white building, for each citizen there, you will get a white die, and you will pay 1 during the income phase. The military building, or red building, for each citizen there, you will gain a red die and pay 2 during the income phase. Keep in mind that during the game, citizens can be expelled and pushed out of their locations on the buildings. For the civil or yellow building and the religious or white building, citizens are expelled in rows, so the furthest right on each row is in danger of being pushed out. For the military or red building, citizens are expelled based on the number used. Now let's take a look at the gameplay. A game lasts a number of rounds. For a 4-player game, it lasts 6 rounds. For a 3-player game, it lasts 5 rounds. And for a 2-player game, it lasts 4 rounds. A round consists of 6 phases in rounds 1 through 3, and 5 phases for the remaining rounds. This is due to only having 3 rounds of activity cards. The round phases. Phase 0 is reveal activity cards. Phase 1, income and salaries. Phase 2, assemble workforce. Phase 3, events. Phase 4, actions. Phase 5, end of round. Now let's look at each in detail. Phase 0, reveal activity cards. You will reveal the activity cards for the current round in the 3 colors. The people on the cards give actions specific to their building. Once they are revealed, we move to Phase 1, income and salaries. Each player receives a fixed income of 10 money. Then each player will pay the cost of their citizens' salaries in the military and religious building locations. For each citizen in the religious building, you will pay 1, and for each in the military building, you'll pay 2. So in this case, blue gains 10 income and pays 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in salary, which means they get 4 money. Yellow gets 5 money, and green gets 4 money. Keep in mind that if you cannot pay, you will pay what you can, and then you will lose 2 victory points. If you do not have any victory points to lose, you would pay nothing. Once all the players have received income and paid salaries, we move to Phase 2, assemble workforce. Players will collect the dice associated with their citizens in the 3 buildings. You will gain 1 die for each citizen in the color of the building that they are located. Each player will roll their dice and place them on their district in the center of the main board. Then the start player does the same for the gray neutral citizens and places them in an unused district. The dice, in this case, represent the workforce of the citizens. Once all the dice are rolled and placed in districts, we move to Phase 3. Events. 2 new events enter play. A red event card, or military card, and then either white or yellow will follow. Then events will take effect left to right. These are located at the bottom of the event cards. The non-dice events must be resolved before you roll your dice. So in this case, our 3rd event requires us to roll a dice and place a neutral citizen in our civil building. Once all the non-dice events have been resolved, the start player will take the black dice accumulated and roll them. These are military events and must be fought. Then the start player has to take out the highest valued die, and they may take out any of the others that they please. If they do not take out all of the dice, you would go in turn order, and then the next player would have to take out the highest valued dice remaining. If you can't take out the dice that you are required to, you would lose 2 victory points. During this process, the red dice value are doubled, and you will gain 1 influence for each dice that you counter. So in this case, blue counters both dice and gains 2 influence. Which brings us to Phase 4, actions. With the start player going clockwise, each player performs 1 action via the workforce or pass. You may use other players' dice, and you would pay them based on how many dice you are using for your action. If you are using 2 dice for your action, you would pay them 4 for their 1 dice. And if you're using 3 dice for your action, you'd pay them 6 for their 1 dice. There are 5 possible actions you can take on your turn or pass. First, activate an activity card. Based on the color, you can activate that color's activity card. You must have a tradesman on the card first to activate the card. This would be one of your citizens placed on the card. If you do not have a tradesman on the card, you would pay the cost on the card to put a citizen from your personal supply on the card as a tradesman. If you do not have any citizens in your personal supply, you can buy one for 2 influence from the general supply. Then you would pay the money cost. Once you place a tradesman on the card, you can use your dice of that same color for the action at the bottom of the card. Some of these have delayed effects, or the hourglass symbol. For these, you would place cubes on the card, and then you would remove a cube to take the effect. So in this case, blue wants to activate the priest. So he bought one of his citizens from the general supply for 2 influence, paid the 6 money cost to place them as a tradesman on the card, which also gives him victory points at the end of the game, in this case 3, and then he will use his white die of 4, which allows him to take this action once, because 4 divided by 3 rounded down is 1, and he will place 1 cube on this card because it has a delayed effect. So in this case, blue would be able to up the value of their yellow die by 3 when removing that cube. The second possible action is construct the cathedral. You would use 1 to 3 dice to place a cube on the same number or numbers. When doing so, you would place bottom to top. When placing for numbers 1 through 3, you would gain 1 victory point and 1 influence. And placing on numbers 4 through 6, you would gain 1 victory point and 2 influence. So in this case, Orange used their white 5 dice to help construct the cathedral. Since it's a 5, they gained 2 influence and 1 victory point. It's good to keep in mind that if you do not have a presence on a particular row, you will lose 2 victory points at the end of the game. The third possible action is to combat events. You would use 1 to 3 dice to combat events threatening the city. You would activate and place cubes based on the conversion and the dice. Then you would gain the influence covered up by the cubes, and if all spots are filled, then that event is countered. The card is scored. The most cubes gains the most victory points on the card, and the second scores the lower number of victory points on the card. Any ties are split. Then you would clear the card and give the card to the player with the most cubes. Or if it's a tie, the one who placed their cubes first. Keep in mind that the marauding card is never taken but just cleared and stays in effect. So in this case, green wanted to combat events, and specifically the second event. They used their red 3, and with the event, you take your red die and divide it by 3. So they placed 1 cube and covered up 1 influence, meaning they gain 1 influence. When this card fills up, the player with the most cubes on this card would gain 3 victory points, and the second most would gain 1. The fourth possible action is to place a citizen on a building. You would use 1 die to place a citizen on that color building from your supply, or one that is already on the board. You would pay 2 influence to get a citizen from the supply to your personal supply. When placing one in the yellow or civil building, corresponding to the number on the die, and slide the citizens, expelling the citizen on the right. The same takes place for the religious or white building. And then for the military building or red building, you would expel the citizen located on the exact number on that die. The citizen that slides out or is expelled is placed on the building and then will be removed at the end of the round. Keep in mind that only 1 color per player can be expelled per round per building. So you may not expel more than 1 per color per building. So in this case, blue spent 2 influence to gain a citizen from the general supply and used their yellow 2 die to place the citizen in the civil building, which pushed their own citizen, but gave them a better location in that building. The fifth possible action is using agriculture. You would divide the dice by 2 and gain that money. So in this case, orange took their 2 yellow 5s, divided it by 2, and gained 5 in money. And then the sixth possible action is pass. This is permanent. You'll gain 2 in money for the first time that you pass, and then you will gain 1 in money for each time you are required to pass after. You'd place them in your district to keep count. So in this case, blue was the first player to pass, and then turns went around until everyone passed, with 2 dice remaining. During phase 3 and 4, you can perform influence actions. These are actions that can be taken any time during these 2 phases, and you will pay influence. You may pay 1 to re-roll one of your dice. You may pay 2 to add a citizen from the general supply to your supply, and then you may pay 4 to turn 1 to 3 dice to the opposite face value. Once all the players have passed, or there are no more dice available, we move to phase 5. End of the round. During this phase, you will collect the money in your district, you will collect your expelled citizens on the buildings, any unused dice will go to the general supply, and the start player will go clockwise. Then rounds will continue until the end of the final round, or the round when the final red card event enters the game. Then we will go into the final scoring. The final scoring takes 5 steps. Step 1, gain 1 victory point per event card you have a cube on that has not been countered. So need the event cards that are located at the bottom of the main game board. Step 2, gain victory points based on your citizens on activity cards. The number of victory points you'll get per citizen is located under them on the card. Step 3, lose 2 victory points for each level of the cathedral that you did not help in constructing. Step 4, reveal and gain victory points for your character cards. And then step 5, add your victory points. And then once all the players have added their victory points, the player with the most victory points is the most prestigious family in the region and wins Troyes.